If we want to move to Christine Weeber, her poem, Witch Dance. And back to Anna, that was one of your selections.
Sure. So there are a lot of things that I like about this poem, but one of them is that when it started, I didn't really know where it was going. And there were several points throughout the poem where I kind of thought that I had a grasp on where it was going. And I guess there's maybe like 3/4 of the way through, I was like, okay, I'm right about where this is going, and then got to have the fun experience of almost like watching it play out, and being what I thought it would be. Almost the way that once you learn a song, like you know how to dance to it, like you know what's coming next, you can anticipate it, and that's the kind of enjoyable thing about it, is that you feel like you know it. I think that this piece also had, once again, the pet interest of mine, the tension between what's expressible and what's ineffable, where the poem is getting at this thing that perhaps we all share, but we know it, we don't know it, it's latent, it's not latent. There's that same kind of push and pull throughout the whole poem, even though I think in the end it kind of lands on one conclusion, which is almost like, when you dance, that's when you're feeling or being this life force, energy, eternal, same thing that we've all had throughout the universe. But it was cool throughout the poem to kind of feel like that's the conclusion we were etching towards.
Let me just ask if any of us here, have you ever participated in a drum circle?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the reason I thought of that is that's the kind of thing you said, ineffable versus what the kind of fever dream you want to tell somebody about after you're out of it, and it's impossible once you've potentially done something on a hallucinogenic scale. And so I was a late comer to that kind of experience, and I was very suspicious of anything. Well, that's the music of the spheres, and it's a celestial dance, and part of your DNA and genetic legacy is participating in this dance that we're all in together. And I kind of very poo-poo about that. And then I have to say that I was in a drum circle, and the circumstances were such that I kind of lost myself, was pulled directly out of any individual experience. And so the poem was interesting because initially I kind of had that sense of familiarity, maybe even a little nostalgia in some of the imagery. I said, well, okay, here comes an interesting environmental poem. That was my first thought. This looks good. And then as I kind of felt drawn into the waltz of the way the language set up, but also the actual description of this kind of anthropological look at dancing, and we're sitting around the bonfire together and we're participating in some really long-term, I was going to say human experience, but that's also a bias, let's say natural or conscious or existence experience. And I kind of gradually started zooming out more and more, and the poem got better and better the more I zoomed out. I really did appreciate that, and I got some of that imagery that you were describing very nicely. So I think it worked on that level for sure.
So this is my analysis of the poem. I really like the poem, and as Chris was saying, the more you zoom out, or the more you look at it, the more you appreciate this poem, and you see so much in this poem as well. And also, as Anna was saying, there's like this almost the pull and push, and that you also attracted you to the other piece, and also it has a bit of that eeriness to it as well. So it's not all like joyful; it has a bit of that. What's going on here? So the first thing about the poem that I thought was very, very interesting is the title, Witch Dance, ? Okay, and we'll get back to that later, because I was like, as I was reading it, I kind of went back to it, and I'm like, I'm trying to think that, is this poet trying to tell us something between the lines more than what meets the eye? So I think with both of these actually, interestingly, Anna, you picked both because there's much more than what meets the eye. There's a lot of hidden, I feel like there's a lot of hidden layers, this one as well. So what I liked about it is overall, I felt that it's a very convivial survival, kind of an upbeat tone to the whole thing, but there's definitely a very ceremonial, almost tribal kind of community take on this poem. The lines that I liked where we stray outside of memory. I thought that was a really nice line. And then she asked, what is that keeps us moving? So she's kind of like making us ponder what's going on here. Let's look at this big picture here. What is keeping us moving as human beings? And then she basically says, and I think this is, I don't know, I'm thinking this is like a current poem, like a return to when Earth carried us not as Scrooge, not as disease, not as weighed, unmet, need, grasping, starving. I thought these are the best lines of the poem, but as delight. So I kind of like her upbeat take on like, okay, fine, we live in a pandemic, in a diseased world, but let's kind of delight. Let's have a little bit of delight. So kind of reclaiming the delight and over mankind, had the power of being delightful. So I thought it was a bit of a celebration of mankind. And then she said, we're hunter-gatherers across continents singing sacred lines. Very interesting. And then she said, again, very interesting, dance, shaking bodies, alive feet. And then she, within the singing, she says, step, clap, pray for survival. So I thought that the dance song, number one, I like the fact that there's music to it, but also a sense of movement. I think that also makes the whole writing more powerful, more effective, that now we feel a little bit, we feel people dancing almost in a tribal way. They're clapping, they're happy, they're communal, okay? So the dance song kind of embodied a sense of movement, of celebration, of people coming together and celebrating. So I felt that this is kind of like a ritual dance. The dance can also be like a ritual dances, like in the past they would do dance together to avert diseases, evils, right? For the continuity of mankind. So a lot of dance happened in the past to also kind of take bad spirits and evil spirits away from us. We dance in a communal way. So the act of dance itself is a form also of relaxing as well. If you're so tensed up, when you dance, you're much more relaxed. So I thought in general, it's a very, very good poem. Now it goes back to kind of a circle back to the title, Witch Dance, which kind of makes me think about two things. Witch dance, the dances of witches, okay? Or wish, like wishing upon a star kind of dance. So I think that there's maybe more to it than meets the eye. But overall, the upbeat ceremonial field of it is pretty interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say I'm going to start talking because I don't want this to sound like a point because I don't know where I'm going to land with it necessarily. But in terms of thinking the two kinds of dance, I'm used to associating dancing generally with something that's very positive. So it's celebratory. It can have this tribal element. It also can be kind of religious, like the whirling dervishes and things like that. So I almost always assume dance by itself is good. So giving me the choice of which dance, and it seems like the simple version of the choice is the natural dance where we're connected with nature and the earth is happy to have us as a copacetic, happy relationship versus the exploitive dance where we're maybe more like in a zombie state. The key line that maybe sent me in this direction had to do with lines pulsing freeways. The idea of thinking of cars on a freeway as maybe veins in a bloodstream, and that just kind of happens by itself. But in autopilot, that kind of dance that is only habitual, is only nostalgic, but only in the most superficial way that's kind of non-reflexive. That's the kind of dance that can lead you to using up all the resources or being the drunk guy who wants to hear the same song at the bar and he just plays the same Journey song again. He's kind of stuck in that one dance and he's unable to break out of it. So I wondered which dance was kind of getting at there's this potential for celebration and renewal and rebirth, but there's also this idea of getting trapped in a cycle. And if there isn't a better definition for addiction than getting trapped in the same familiar yet comforting dance, I don't know what a better definition could be for that. So maybe part of the question is which of those two things you want to get kind of caught up in.
And I think that's the thing, that the fact that it is a question rather than just telling us just a title, like it could be the dance. No, it's giving us more of a question mark, is in a way an act by itself of engaging the reader. And I think the way she was also writing, it sounds like she's also a celebratory of communal and engaging people to be together and to be also more in a community. So I like the fact that she also engages the reader by that kind of like asking that question. And again, what is that keeps us moving, question mark. So she's again trying to trigger, we're thinking, yeah, that's, reasons to survive and to be on this earth and, to be together and that kind of thing. But it really is effective. It's very, very good. I like it very much. I think it's definitely beautiful in many shapes and forms. Musically oriented too, very nice.
Right,
Yeah.
and it is something to be said to have that kind of movement element. I mean, as far as physical movement, kinesthetic movement in a written piece, that's pretty unique. I do have, or I'll say this: our contributors have really come through for us, and there's even more to come after this. But believe it or not, Christine was able to send me a little bit of behind the scenes. So thank you to our contributors who responded to me in short notice. But she made the comment that this piece was written in response to a prompt. The prompt was, if you made a prayer for a place or creature, what would it be? And what she chose was polar bear, which is kind of the initial image. And kind of, as we mentioned, it kind of starts maybe with kind of an expected kind of environmental image and then kind of zooms out and zooms back in time from there. So that her starting point is polar bear, and it's kind of with the imagery of Arctic Sea melting, polar bears being unmoored, their future is threatened. And then she kind of continues with the kind of the larger scale viewpoint. Christine continues, humans haven't always had to live in these spaces and life ways of gut-wrenching contradictions, harm, and separation. We have not always had to apologize to Mother Nature while moving through our days between birth and death. As we are now in what some call the great unraveling, we can let go of what doesn't serve us or the beings we share this planet with. She says, as an editor in an anthropology publication, I've carried with me stories about healing and sustainable life ways of contemporary hunter-gatherers, and kind of comments on this is who we all were. We all used to be hunter-gatherers prior to around 12,000 years ago. That's kind of hardwired into who we are. And that's, I'm sympathetic to that viewpoint because I think about that a lot myself. So it's kind of drawn into this piece with that take. So she mentions a couple in particular, and an author, a writer who I hadn't thought of in a while, but I was familiar with, who she mentions is Wade Davis. Being an inspiration, anthropologist Wade Davis. So I think that was kind of a good reminder to me, like, oh, look up Wade Davis again, because he's a pretty fascinating guy. And she did send a couple of links in addition for actual dances of these hunter-gatherers from different tribes in Southern Africa. And then comments at the very end. All hands are on deck. We need this now from each of us. Which dance? Bringing forth our medicine or continue on a path of devastation, harm, extinction. So it is that kind of question that ends with a question mark, and even in her explanation and behind the scenes summary, she has that question embedded in there as well. So clearly there's kind of those options available to us as an individual, as a species, probably more importantly. What are we gonna do? So yeah, I think that's a little bit of insight, and I think it kind of followed the reading of the poem to kind of give us that perspective of individual to a larger, community, larger embodiment of the planet, I guess, ultimately.
The message is pretty good. It's coming together to better our community, maybe finding a cure, or just like praying for better things also, and having positive energy too. I think that also contributes, right, in the betterment.
I don't know, I think there's a little, as always, tension in the middle of that though, because she also, she says she ends on our rattles our own, which is a little, I've got my rattle, you've got yours. And that line earlier about, but as delight, as bones that danced close in, well, I think you can't help but associate bones with death, which is the opposite of survival. So I think even in this, like celebratory, even in a circle, right? Like a circle is a closed system. Someone's outside the circle, like you can't get into a circle. So I think there's even in the survival, there's loss, like an exclusion, and it's not all rainbows and sunshine. It's I think still hard, and it's almost like in the witch dance question, like, okay, well, who's going to be included in this dance? Who knows the dance? I think I guess I have a slightly different interpretation, which is
I think that's important to kind of keep that balance there, because yeah, it is in the poem, and I think it is in the author's mindset. Yeah, there is that element of the other side, right? Yeah, so
I do think there's that coming together pull, but then there's also a question of like who, how.
This is probably me. I'm sure this is me projecting, but I like that point, because the idea, part of the sadness is, as a human individual, you want memory because you want to stay alive and be alive. But what's the line? We stray into a precision of memory, and maybe the precision of memory is the clinging to a certain kind of life, or clinging to life generally. And the part of the more somber half of the poem is that you may have to make some choices about what you want to preserve and kind of where that dance takes you. And as an individual who wants to live, I'm like, yes, dance, clap, drums are all excellent, but there also might be this notion that there's these larger spheres in which we have to kind of put our own egos aside.
Right. I think you're right. I mean, I think that's one of the lines that I like. We stray outside of memory. So it could be a question of like, are we going to repeat history? Are we going to keep on doing the same mistakes over and over again? It's like, there is definitely that, like, hey, I'm giving you a bunch of questions here. It's like almost quizzing us. Do you know what the right thing to do? But yeah, definitely it has a death, connotations or ideas in it, within it. And I don't know if she wants to tell us, I'm not sure. I don't know if she wants to tell us, hey, there is good and evil. What do you choose? What do you choose? What do you lean more towards? So it seems like, definitely it seems like there's a little bit of like quizzing happening here.
Well, it just occurred to me too, that like, I mean, on the personal level, you don't want to be the branch of wisteria that gets pruned off. You don't want to be that branch. But it has to happen, for the better, for the survival of the larger whole. So there is that, there is that dynamic happening. I mean, right, it's part of that cycle.
Right.
I think this is a good place to kind of pause our discussion. We'll kind of wrap up our summary of the issue 11. We had 3 great pieces, as it turns out. Jerica Taylor, Wisteria Witness, Bonnie Matthews Brock, Red Leaves, Christine Weeber, Witch Dance. So we'll say thank you to Anna, thank you to Vian. Thanks, Chris, once again. And we'll stick around for a moment, so don't leave us yet. But we'll pause here. And again, thanks for joining us. Great time, great conversation. Thanks for your thoughts. We'll talk to you again later.